sacred ground in America, the White House.
I'm telling you, India have.
What? Hello? What are you smoking? Is that crack? Crack.
It's not legalized.
But you're getting high. You're smoking crack. I'm going to tell you something. 15 years ago, this would have never been possible. Someone could sit outside the White House grounds and smoke crack and just sit there as comfortable as if in their own backyard. But you're getting high on the most sacred ground in America, the White House.
I'm telling you, India have.
What? What has happened to America to allow this? How does this happen that you get to sit here and smoke crack away? She's sitting up here in broad daylight, lighting up a pipe to smoke crack. I will not sleep. We will not rest until we take back our beloved America. You know, it's so unfortunate that we live in a world today where we're seeing things that literally 10 or 15 years ago would have been absolutely impossible. From the graffiti to raising foreign flags on American soil as if they've taken siege on the United States and the most populous cities. I mean, someone being so comfortable sitting out in a public park across from the White House with a crack pipe, smoking crack, and then when we get the attention of the U.S. Park Police, they switch it to marijuana. And you speak to law enforcement after the removal, and they tell you, well, it's illegal, but if we were to arrest her, she'd be back out on the streets in 24 hours. No different than the carjackings that are going on all across this country. Almost 10,000 in 1 month in Baltimore. President Biden's granddaughter, the SUV, the Secret Service that was protecting her in Georgetown. I mean, they were so brazen, they were trying to steal the SUV and they were fired upon. I mean, these young people have no boundaries now. They have no fear. It's because you have legislatures in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and across the country where the laws are geared to embolden them. They don't want to lock them up because they're of a certain age. They don't want to serve jail. They want to put them in some home or some clinic where they can get therapy, get some kind of attention, which does nothing to erase much of the damage that has been done to these kids. A lot of these kids are angry. They're growing up without fathers. And you ask yourself, what is happening to our beloved America? And don't get me wrong, you know, I was so outraged when I was on the grounds of Lafayette Park recently and saw this person light up. And obviously, you know, they're mentally disturbed. There's so many mentally ill people that's placed back on the street. Many of them are veterans. And I actually read the commentary of people saying that if they were to bring this to law enforcement attention, they would probably lock them up, or they would be abused and violated by law enforcement. Since this thing to remove the police, the dumb down law enforcement in the society, people actually believe that law enforcement is the enemy. And I'm talking about intelligent, sophisticated people believe that law enforcement, if they bring something to law enforcement attention, nothing's going to happen. You could not be further from the truth. Law enforcement is still our best friends and our first line of defense. But since the defunded police, law enforcement has been weakened. They have to think about being sued. Anybody can raise a complaint against them. It affects their benefits. It affects their way of life. It affects their upward mobility in law enforcement. And all these things are being played against us. And you better believe the juveniles and the criminals, they know exactly that the legislation and the laws work in their favors now. You go to the judge to try to get an order to change these laws, and they want to further put them in homes. They don't believe that they should be locked up. So from the court system to law enforcement to the elected officials, everything now favors this empathy and this sympathy for juveniles, but there are prosecutors and state attorneys that are speaking out and saying, no, these guys are thugs, they're dangerous, they're changing our way of life. I literally, just this past on Wednesday at the Democratic National Committee, pro-Palestinian protesters did not even have a permit, heard about that the Democrats were having this big confab at the DNC. They just showed up and blocked the entrance to the DNC. Literally, they just blocked it. I mean, law enforcement from the Capitol Hill Police, from the Metropolitan Police Department stormed on the place. They were tossing these kids. The kids were trying to hit law enforcement. They were trying to pull their pepper spray. The pepper spray law enforcement had no respect for law enforcement. And let me tell you, these are spoiled, rich kids who hate America. They think they have all this solidarity with pro-Palestine and Hamas. And now you have this new movement where Osama bin Laden's papers on why he attacked America, saying that an attack on America, an attack on superpowers are not justified. And young people are taking the words of Osama bin Laden, taking his word and says, well, attacks by big superpowers like America is not what they always seem to be. And they are siding with Osama bin Laden. This propaganda, I have no idea, it could be coming from Iran. You have no idea where it's coming from, but it's infiltrating the mind of these young people. And they believe that America and places like Israel is their worst enemy. And for those that embrace their gender identity, their sexual preference, the fact that they're women, if you were to go in those parts of the world, many of you would be killed, many of you would be locked up, and many of you would have no rights. It's so unfortunate that you are having solidarity with something that does not have your best interest, does not represent your values, but you get involved in the surface of the conversation. You get involved in believing that America is a colonialist nation. You believe that Israel is colonizing the Palestinians, and you could not be further from the truth. We have a problem in this country. Propaganda is not the guns and the bullets that we should be concerned about. It's the propaganda that is being spread, that is destroying just the thinking, the depthness, the research of our young people. And when you're out here protesting, you must step back and ask yourself, what are you really protesting for? But it's one thing to peaceful protests, but to attack law enforcement, to block buildings like the DNC, we need to wake up. This is not about Democrats. It's not about Republicans. It's not about a left, about a right. I'm telling you, this propaganda, even the FBI and the intelligence services told us just this week that Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS are in this country, and it's just a matter of time before they activate their cells. You know what they're telling us? They have declared war on America. They've declared war. We used to say, if you see something, say something. Our young people have been so brainwashed. Look at what's happening at Columbia. Look at what happened at George Washington University just this week. A truck out with a sign saying, we must stop Hamas. We must stop that brutality. We must support the Palestinians, the innocents. We must support the innocent people in Israel, the Jews. And all of a sudden, some pro-Palestinian protesters just literally just went and knocked out all the windows in the van, just knocked it out. Violence, vandalism. They don't care. With all the consequences, they really believe that our judicial system, our system of courts and our system of laws will not hold them accountable. And they keep pushing the envelope. They're in Washington, D.C. today. They're in New York tomorrow. They're in Los Angeles next week. It's a matter of time before they come into a neighborhood near you. Our country is changing. America, you need to wake up. And if I can't say it, I can't say this loud enough. America is at war. Not only with our enemies, but with young people who've declared war on our way of life because they've been brainwashed by this propaganda. Whether it's Osama bin Laden justified his attack on America, they forget what happened on 9/11. They're going to forget on what happened on October the 7th in Israel. They forget until it impacts them and their way of life or someone they love and care about. America needs to get a grip on what's happening today because I'm telling you, whether it's desecrating the symbols that we believe in, whether it's smoking crack cocaine, whether it's attacking law enforcement, whether it's spreading graffiti on some of our most pristine areas in the world, whatever it is, These young people are turning their back on America because they have been brainwashed. And I say to you, America, you better wake up, because America is at war. And that war has been declared, and whether you want to fight it or not, they're bringing the war here, and you better wake up and get ready, because America has changed forever. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. Today is all about entrepreneurship and celebrating entrepreneurship in every facet that you can imagine. One of our favorites, Tiffany Norwood, founder and CEO of Tibetan 2022 Entrepreneur of the Year, is back. And of course, one of my favorites, Marcia L. Dyson, founder of Women's Global Institute. Marcia, how are you?
I'm doing well, Armstrong.
So what is it about entrepreneurship and empowering?
Well, you know, we began in ancient days all as merchants, right? Either bartering and trading for our goods, our agribusiness that we may have had, our corn, for our horses, whatever the case might be. In all parts of the world, marketing has always been a part of our lives. Whether we were entrepreneurs or whether we were the buyers, we all fit into that mode of consumerism, which really helps spawn the economics of any country, any community, and for me, especially women.
Tiffany, what do you put together for us today? What do our audience have to look forward to?
Yeah, it's going to be a really amazing, very special show today. First off, Armstrong, I want to thank you for being so gracious as to let me do a show takeover, way better than an Instagram takeover, right? In celebration of Global Entrepreneurship Week. And in this show, we have Marcia Dyson, the founder of Women's Global Institute, as you mentioned, and Viktoriya Tigipko, the founder and managing partner of TA Ventures and the Odessa Film Festival, and also a truly amazing women leader, leading us off with this first segment, talking about the state of entrepreneurship around the world, and in particular, how it's impacting women. And then in the next section, we're going to be talking about money.
Let's just go to the first. We'll get to what we get to. Let's start with Viktoriya and Marcia. And is it just about women? Is your only concern about women? What about the men and everybody else? Entrepreneurship knows no color, knows no gender.
No, exactly. Entrepreneurship knows no color and knows no gender. But also, you know, we hear a lot from the male entrepreneurs around the world. And so as a female leader, I wanted to make sure to sort of start the day and the platform with letting some of the women take the stage. Marcia is focused on the Women's Global Institute and many other things around the world. Viktoriya is a venture capitalist, founder, investor, and leader just of everyone. She does also have WeTech, but like me, you know, her market is the world. So I thought, why don't I start this segment with two fellow global entrepreneurs and investors to talk about the state of play around the world when it comes to entrepreneurship. And maybe we can start by having Viktoriya introduce herself and talk a bit about what she's seeing as the founding partner and managing partner of TA Ventures.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, Tiffany. Thank you for the show. Now, originally I'm from Ukraine, and I started my business from 2008, building the company, basically venture building of 5 companies. And then from 2010, I understood that I have to bring more investors and founders to Ukraine. So I started the Friends IDC, Investor Day, Central and Eastern Europe, with 3,000 participants in the 11, 12, 13 before the war started, and more than 300 startups from 25 countries, mostly focused on Central Eastern Europe and Ukraine. So that boosted actually 2010 I started to invest, and currently I have more than 250 investments in my portfolio in Ukraine, Europe, US, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. So I was the first female venture capitalist and venture investor and company builder back then. And
you know, let me stop you a minute. You know, people will find it fascinating that you're coming to us live from Ukraine. And when we think of Ukraine, we think of chaos, and there's nothing but scenes of war. But you're telling us today that there are people that still continue with their lives, continue with entrepreneurship, continue creating opportunities in Ukraine. How much more difficult is it with the current environment that you find yourself in as an entrepreneur?
Thank you for the question. So 70% of the founders of the Ukrainian startups, they did not leave the country. And 30% of the founders, which temporarily, 90% of them, they would like to come back. So we need the support, and this is not we are begging for money. We just need support because it is the business. And myself, also a chairperson of the Ukrainian Startup Fund, is the grant fund supported by the government, by the Ministry of Digital Transformation, with a 40 million investments from United Nations, 10 million investment in 3 years of the functioning of the Ukrainian Startup Fund. It's a grant fund. We put 35K of grants to the pre-seed and seed start, including 10K for learning. Then now we are mostly focused on military tech, dual use, and there are a lot of opportunity. We are screening the hundreds of projects every month, and we supported more than 400 projects. And just to give you some statistics, in 3 years, since the inception of Ukrainian Startup Fund, the founders, the companies, they raised 10 times more money, and they hired 10 times more people. There are a lot of interesting opportunities focused in Ukraine now for harmonizing the legislation of Ukraine with FDA focused on biotech up to the phase 2 testing. There is another big subsector, the thousands of objects are demolished. The damage is about 1 trillion and is growing, and we need to reconstruct or rebuild the country right now. So the second big subsegment is reconstruction of Ukraine, and we would like to bring the tech companies, big tech companies like Gropius, Tesla for construction, to be able to rebuild the country in 5-10 years. And we would like to start to do it right now. New technologies, that's exactly what we needed. In construction tech, we would like legislation, construction norms, with Austria, because I consider the construction norms and construction legislation is the best. 25% of the Austrians housing, and we understand that during the war and after the war, 17.2 million displaced people in Ukraine will not afford to buy apartments, they will afford to rent apartments, and that will be a huge government program focused on that. Another big thing is that Ukraine can be the green legtech and regtech to be platform for different technologies in space tech, in military tech, in food tech, in biotech, in deep tech, etc. Our program as of now, and that is the program of the government. I'm also the member of the Commission of the Ukraine on the Economic Development, and that's exactly what we are doing. That's exactly where our focus now. And another big thing is also the semiconductors, and we would like to build the tier 1, tier 2 testing, including the packaging. It can bring of dollars into Ukraine, and that this is easy for Ukraine because we have 90,000 of engineering students of engineering specialties, electric engineering, many others, legit to be included into this program of tier 1, tier 2 testing, and that's exactly the main segments of the program.
Thank you so much. One thing that I find always fascinating when I travel around the world in these conflict zones, which is, constantly heartbreaking, is that whether it's a conflict or a natural disaster, the people that immediately come in and start rebuilding and reimagining are the entrepreneurs and the innovators. So it's so important to support them. If we want, everyone talks about, let's change the world, let's make a better world. It's the entrepreneurs and the innovators that actually do it. I remember after that major earthquake in Italy, just north of Rome, I was going to Rome to speak, and the local government was like, would you come up there and speak to our entrepreneurs? And I thought, sure, but I really understood why they invite me up, because it was the entrepreneurs in that local town, and it was relatively a small town, about an hour and a half north of Rome, that was saving the community. They were immediately reimagining everything from government to education to tech, as Viktoriya was talking about, even, housing, right? So entrepreneurship isn't just about economy, it's also very much about society. And with that, I would like to, you know, have Marcia weigh in with what she's doing to help make the world a better place through entrepreneurship.
Well, what you were saying and what Viktoriya was also saying resonates with what we're doing in the premise of our Women's Global Institute Trade Bureau and why I thought it was important. In 1980, I was Reverend Jackson's first chief of staff for his International Trade Bureau, where we were trying to get the African American community to invest outside the United States, because at that particular time there was really not equity as we can see it in other places for us to venture and to grow portfolios. And then in 10,000 years ago, which is the reason for the celebration of the special luncheon we're having on November the 19th, I helped to launch the Women's Entrepreneurship Day, which was at the United Nations, where 144 countries representing the women in 144 countries came together so that we could partner one another, know each other's struggles, and see how we can invest, at least cheer on their particular situation as it related to investments and to trades, and to extend and to expand their own entrepreneurships wherever they may be in those particular countries. But when we look at our circumstances, another reason why I wanted to launch a trade bureau, especially in the United States, to do partnerships outside the country, is that you talk about conflict zones. Well, America still has conflict zones, especially when it comes to black women entrepreneurs. If you can imagine that a black group of women called the Fearless Fund is given $100 million to help black women who are still, no matter where you are in the world, behind the 8 ball, to advance their knowledge so they could become great entrepreneurs. Because as you said, Tiffany, that we know that as women who not only build our communities and support our countries, we really do give a lot to our states and to our local governments and to our federal governments via our entrepreneurship. So we wanted those women to have some founders. When they lost that $100 million because one man decided that black women should not be given that money because it was set aside for them because of their ethnicity and race, Robert F. Smith said something so wonderful to me at the Invest Fest that happened this past summer in Atlanta. He looked at those 20,000 black young people, knowing that they wouldn't be the ones probably getting the support they need from banks or any other backbone, saying, he told us and reminded me that we are enough. So what I'm trying to remind women at our lunch of our trade bureau, that we are enough. We have enough economic income to be the investors for one another, the support group for one another, and to not only in the United States, but I'm partnering them with Japan, with the Middle East, with the continent of Africa, with Indonesia. So sometimes we have to take our investments where we have the probability of growing faster if we cannot do it in our own particular country. So I resonate with everything you said, and I can situate it right here in the 50 states of the United States of America. So that empathy that I have for you in Ukraine, I hope that too that you have for us, because we need to have this great sisterhood to build this world. Because for me, it's not only about the economics, it really is a humane situation that I think that women who have had histories of being the merchant women. I even think about the scripture in Proverbs that says about the virtuous woman, how she gets up in the morning and how they weave the cloth and they sell it, this purple cloth, in the marketplace. So I think that we have to reinstitute that, to have this sense of what we are. And for our trade bureau, we have a tagline: purposeful and profitable social engagement. The purposeful is knowing that when we get something, that you have to give back. So that lends to our mission, which is based upon our integrity with a capital T, and that T is we got to learn to trust each other as women, trade with each other as women, and then train women along the way so that we can have a legacy, not only for this organization, but every member who joins our fold.
Marcia, I want to thank you and Viktoriya for joining us for this eye-opening and enlightening discussion about the global view when it comes to entrepreneurship, with an emphasis on women. Viktoriya, we wish you well, and we remain in our prayers. And I'm just so encouraged to know that not because of, but in spite of, life and economic opportunities continue in Ukraine. And thank you both so much for joining us. When Tiffany and I return, we'll be joined by Iarotska, Freada Kapor, and Mitch Kapor as we continue this discussion on global entrepreneurship. I'm Armstrong Williams. Stay with us. And welcome back to the broadcast. I'm Armstrong Williams. I'm going to turn it back over to my co-host today, Tiffany Norwood.
Yes, so first off, happy Global Entrepreneurship Week again. For this segment, we're going to be focused on money, which is one of the main concerns of most founders, and we're going to both look at it from the founder perspective as well as the investor perspective. We have three of my favorite people here today, Freada and Mitch Kapor of Kapor Capital, as well as the authors of Closing the Equity Gap. They're going to talk about their history as founders and investors and a new model for placing money. And then we also have Anna Iarotska, and I always ask Anna to forgive me with the pronunciation of the last name. She's a founder and CEO of Robo Wonderkind, and also a friend of mine. And she, to me, exhibits the type of founder that Mitch and Freada talk about, beyond myself, Armstrong, of course. So why don't we start by welcoming Mitch and Freada. They're coming in live from California. And Mitch and Freada, can you talk to us about your history with Kapor Capital and this new model that you guys have with investment around closing, investing in gap closing companies and distance traveled founders?
We'd be happy to. Mitch, do you want to start and then I'll follow on?
Sure. I'm a longtime tech entrepreneur. Back around 2010, I was doing a lot of tech angel investing, and Freada came to me and said, you're good at this, but why don't you invest in ways that are consistent with your values? And I said, but then I'd miss out on all the hot deals. But then Freada said, look, we're both empirical and pragmatic. Why don't we do an experiment? And that was the foundation of Kapor Capital. And that experiment was to ask whether we could invest in companies that closed gaps of access or opportunity or outcome for low-income communities or communities of color. In other words, companies that are making a positive difference in the world. Could we do that exclusively and make money and get comparable returns? And over a decade and a couple hundred companies, we found that we could, and that it was not concessionary. And that was the basis of Kapor Capital and the great founders that we've invested in and their life stories. I think we have a different view on what talent is. And if I could ask Freada maybe to talk a little bit about
before you talk about it, I'm curious about something. In your decade, looking at these underserved and disadvantaged communities, is it really race, gender, inequality is the biggest barrier for entrepreneur success? Or have you discovered something else that is often hidden and not spoken about? Because someone watching this broadcast today who may be a woman or may be black or whatever may feel that even after all these years and decades of progress, that is the biggest barrier to success. And in my experience, I would say that is the least of their barriers, but I welcome your challenge.
Well, let me take a look at that. I think what you're raising is sometimes these issues are overlapping and they're complicated and we need to look at nuances. But when we invest, we are looking to invest in hardcore tech startups. We are looking for founders whose lived experience identifies these problems and the solutions that they are bringing to their companies. So we are taking their lived experience, which sometimes might be encountering biases, barriers, obstacles because of race, because of income, because of ethnicity, because of gender, because of anything. But they're taking these difficult experiences and turning them into insights and turning them into startups. And that's what we back. So the core business has to be gap closing for low-income communities and or communities of color. We have founders from every racial background, every gender identity. But what we care about, as Tiffany asked about, is their distance traveled story. So we want to know how that lived experience led to their insights, but we want to know where they got on their own steam. We want to know where they started in life and how they've used opportunities or created opportunities on their own. We are not looking for pedigrees. We're not looking for people who were handed or born into unfair advantage.
Yeah, and I would ask.
Let's get Anna in the conversation.
Okay, but first, can I add something to that? That portfolio, Kapor Capital, because I'm very much, a female founder, Black woman of color that has started 9 companies that have impacted billions of people around the world of all races and genders and everything, right? What I like about what they're doing is that they're, focusing on, are you starting companies that are adding to a problem or helping to solve a problem, right? And as Freada said, they could be all races and genders and backgrounds from rural areas, et cetera, as the founders. That's sort of the first thing. And the second thing is then when they're deciding to place money with the founder, they're not looking at, do you know the tech bros and everything in Silicon Valley? They're looking at the individual and saying, where did you start and how did you get here? And their performance is top quartile against all venture capitalists. So it's also good business, Armstrong. And to that point, we have Anna, who doesn't even necessarily realize that she's a benefactor of this, because LearnLaunch, one of her investors, also looks to Kapor Capital and their model for how they choose founders. So let's turn to Anna as someone who...
Before you turn to Anna, let me just raise this though.
Okay.
Because Dante is not joining us in the next segment, so we're going to keep all our guests for the next segment. So we do have time. Okay?
We do have time. Okay.
Your success and failure is not because you're a woman or because you're Black.
Agreed.
So what is the main ingredient? No, I get that. So what is the main ingredient to your success?
Okay, the main ingredient to my success personally is, I kept my eyes on God to handle all the suffering and abuse that was being thrown at me while I was doing these startups. And doing startups are hard to do for anyone of any race, any gender, any age. It's just a hard thing to do. Then you layer it on top of all this bad behavior that has nothing to do with me. Everyone focuses on, like marginalized or disadvantaged or underserved. I hate those terms referred to me. There's nothing marginal about me. I'm not the problem. The problem are the people on the other side, discounting my genius, not looking at the ideas that I have and valuing them in the same way because of what they see on the outside. I came up with a large language model that I submitted like 100 pages to the NSF in 2012. And they were like, oh, I don't know if she can handle it. I had the system architecture, the alpha product submitted. I couldn't get that money, right? The founder of Network Solutions, the first internet startup ever, his name is escaping me at the moment, was a Black man. The first internet entrepreneur was a Black man. That company assigned out the domain names and like what GoDaddy and all of them do now, but at the time, he had a monopoly. When the internet started taking off in the mid-90s and he was trying to raise money, and it wasn't like you need vision, it was obvious that was going to print money, no one would give it to him. So he had to force sale on the cheap before he imploded, and then the group that bought it from him, within a year, they were able to sell out for over $1 billion. So it's not the individuals, it's not Anna, it's not me, it's not whoever, it's the institutions around and their mindsets and limited vision.
Now back to Anna. Tiffany?
Okay, so now back to Anna.
But thank you for that answer, because I think it's important.
Yeah, it's definitely important. So now back to Anna. So Anna is one of those founders that you guys look for, and actually LearnLaunch Venture Fund, the founders of LearnLaunch were at an event where we did a fireside chat in New York City, Mitch and Freada, because they so admire you and they built the basis of their fund off of what your vision is that you then captured in closing the equity gap. So I brought Anna not only for that reason, but also she represents some of the really cool stuff that we're starting to see in the future of education and bringing STEM and robotics to everyone. And it goes to, as you said, distance traveled. She wasn't necessarily a STEM or tech person. She instead, had this love for tech and STEM, and then over time founded Robo Wunderkind to bring robotics and that level of education to everyone. And as a Master of Engineering student that's literally in the midst of a robotics challenge right now at grad school, I can tell you it's not an easy thing what she's done. So Anna, please, tell us more about your inspiration to start Robo Wunderkind and what you guys are doing in schools in the United States and hopefully eventually around the world.
You know what I'm going to do? Because I know we've got about a minute and something out before break. I'm going to go ahead and go to the break early so we can call, because I think they really want to hear what you have to say without interruption. Okay, so you don't, speaking of soundbite, you give us a narrative. I'm Armstrong Williams. Thank you, Tiffany, for making this possible today. I want to appreciate everybody joining us, and we'll be back. And welcome back. And I must say that Anna Iarotska, who's the CEO and co-founder of Robo Wunderkind, grew up in Ukraine, spent time in Austria, and now she lives in Washington, D.C.
Yes. Welcome to D.C., Anna.
Love D.C. Anna, talk to us.
So our product is Robo Wunderkind, and with Robo Wunderkind, we're blowing children's minds by giving them a possibility to build their own robots already at the age of 5. They can do it as part of their lesson. Isn't it amazing? So they're having lots of fun, but the most important thing, they're learning, and they're developing self-efficacy towards STEM. So they are learning that they can become robotics engineers, they can become problem solvers, and we do it as part of school. We started with a Kickstarter campaign in 2015, and we had the majority of our backers from the US, which was super inspiring. And now we had our successful period selling this as a rather expensive Christmas toy, but I'm so happy and proud that we are now focusing on schools where we can reach so many more children. And I'm proud to share that since we launched our product that is focused on the US and designed for the US educational system, we launched it in June 2022, and we grew it already to 20,000 students learning and playing and having lots of fun with Robo Wunderkind. But why we're doing that? Because we want those children to be inspired for STEM careers. And STEM careers are actually that's a lever for economic mobility, because STEM professions are very highly paid, and we want to increase representation of women like me, like myself. So it would be a nice inspiration for myself at school, but also children of all backgrounds and also of minority backgrounds. We want to give them an opportunity to discover STEM early and to think of themselves as scientists, robotics engineers, and also entrepreneurs and problem solvers.
Mitch, one of the things that Anna really focused on was STEM, the science, the technology, the engineering, and math. And she also talks about the classroom, how sometimes, particularly with education in the United States today, these kids are not getting a quality education. They're not proficient in math, English, and science, and reading, and how important it is to stem these kids in a direction of the science and the engineering, because that's really where you have the value of the jobs, you can make a difference, and really where you can get the big pay. How do we change the educational system, make sure that is a focus, that when these kids do graduate, you find the Annas and the Tiffanys of the world competing in the global marketplace?
Well, some of it is when you're teaching computer science, which is now, important for everyone, to do it in ways that relates to the kids and their lives, their experiences. It needs to be relevant to them, and that is absolutely possible if the curricula are adapted to reflect the needs and interests of the communities that they're serving. And so Kapor Foundation is involved in a big effort to do a culturally relevant computer science curriculum. And when you give material to kids that makes sense to them, they're just going to thrive. They're going to go for it. It's not some abstract, why should I bother with this? And I really think that's central.
Freada, anything from you on this?
Well, definitely. Mitch mentioned our foundation. Dr. Allison Scott is the CEO of the Kapor Foundation. If you go to kaporcenter.org, you can learn all about it. She did a very robust study of who has access to computer science education in different states. So it isn't that all of our schools have the same curricula or the same opportunities for kids. If you look at it by zip code, the poorer the community, and therefore in this country, that means the more Black and brown, unfortunately, that community, the less access there is to computer science. So making relevant computer science education available to all zip codes would dramatically change the entrepreneurial ranks. We want everybody to be excited by the possibility of learning STEM, building companies, being entrepreneurs. We invested in a company called Elite Gaming Live that is taking kids who are disengaged with school but good at gaming and saying, wait a second, your gaming skills can turn you into STEM majors where you can get great careers in technology. And so we're trying to find those kids who lean towards gaming and lean against school to get them back on track.
And I'll amplify that. Like, I started my STEM career in the 70s. I became very interested in tech, not just because of computers, but a lot of it had to do with gaming. And I started to teach myself to code from a book and using paper and pen. And Mitch knows this. You don't need a computer to learn how to code. You just need the computer to know if you're right. And then from there, I got accepted to Cornell Engineering in 1985. Can I just pause for a second and give a shout out to Mitch, because he is a childhood hero of mine, and so it's always a great honor even to be virtually in the same space as him. The first computer code I ever licensed was in 1992 on Wall Street, and it was built off the basis of Lotus 1-2-3 and Visual Basic and WordPerfect, all these software programs that Mitch had created. And you know, Armstrong, I saved that code all these years. And for Mitch doesn't know this. I couldn't tell him when I was in person with him because I was a little bit too shy to say it. But for years, I'd been telling my friends, someday I'm going to meet Mitch Kapor and have him sign my code. And that happened last month, Armstrong. Thank you, Mitch.
You know, Anna, and Mitch, also thank you. I'm very familiar with Lotus and all those early things that were in the marketplace. But Anna, you know, it's interesting. You create these toys. What have you learned about what is it with children that really makes them want to learn, to be engaged, excited about learning?
It's about having it not forced, about offering them playful experiences where they can decide what they want to do. And that's what we also encourage, not just with our product, but the way we do our teacher training and teacher support and mentoring, is like encouraging teachers to let it go and create an experience where a student can be in the driver's seat and can ask a question and like say, and decide, today I want to build a robot that will solve this problem in my town, and make it like really relevant for the community they're coming from. So it's about self-driven education, about having fun, and actually giving children an opportunity to explore and supporting them in this process.
For Global Entrepreneurship Week, Anna, one of the things I think is really important is to activate other people as entrepreneurs and to see themselves as founders. So can you share a bit about how you became a founder? Did you always think you would start a company?
Actually, no. When you speak about how society imposes or like limits some of our possibilities, I can relate a lot to that, because as a girl growing up in 90s in Ukraine, in post-Soviet country, there was a lot of opportunities which were not available to myself, and I became inspired about the possibilities that the technology world opens for us much later in my career. In my late 20s, with being in a corporate job, I actually realized that there is much more I can do, and that's where I self-taught myself to become an entrepreneur, or like I set on this journey of self-discovery and self-learning. And in the process, I was asking myself why I never imagined myself being an entrepreneur or an engineer when I was growing up as a girl, and I think I should have, because I was good in math. Like why wouldn't I become an engineer? Like it's one of the career paths that should be open to any girl. And that's why with RoboWunderkind we were thinking of like where do we start, and like we wanted to start very early with children at a very young age, and also to make sure that this is accessible. And that's why now working with public schools, and I'm so proud to share that 70% of students learning with RoboWunderkind are in Title I schools. It makes me really happy that we are giving these opportunities to children that really deserve it. And it's so amazing to see like when every child has a talent, and like it's so important to give them a possibility to discover it, and also to do that early in their learning journey, because sometimes it's much more difficult to reach a teenager, while young kids in elementary school, they're just open to just giving it a try and like having this hands-on experience. So starting early, seeding those seeds I believe is what making change. And I'm so happy also that there's people as Mitch and Freada who are supporting us entrepreneurs making this impact and trying to make this world full of more amazing opportunities.
So Mitch, I want to throw you a curveball, something I've been taking notes, something that has not been introduced into this conversation. Unlike the monopolies we see in search and social media, where small businesses own the core IP, AI is different, okay? So much of the core IP was developed by the research community and is therefore what we would consider to be open source. So moreover, at least Meta is committed to open source releasing their LLM, but this means no big tech company will have a monopoly on this technology. So my question to you is, what do you think this means for the future of AI in the economy?
No question, AI is going to be incredibly important to the economy because the technology of AI is going to pervade every single sector, from health, education, workplace, everything. There is a question about whether it is going to be open and decentralized so that every entrepreneur, every business can adapt it the way they best see fit, or whether it is going to be controlled by a small number of big companies. I think history has shown us that the internet, which was originally not controlled by any one company, but was highly decentralized, that's what produced the explosion of innovation. And I think we need to go down the same path this time. So we have to make sure that the core technologies do remain open, available to everyone, and not controlled by any one or two companies.
Freada, quickly.
I think there's huge opportunity with AI, but it's also incredibly expensive to run it. And so we have to make sure that the access to the infrastructure that helps run it is widely available. We also need to make sure that we're putting guardrails to control the biases, not just letting it fly however it's going to fly. We have great hope for AI for good, and we see many of our gap-closing companies already employing AI to make their products available at an enormous scale. And some of those are in education. One of our companies...
We have 45 seconds. I wanted to give you, Tiffany, a chance to thank you. And also, your guests are here not today because of me, but because of your reputation and your incredible genius in the marketplace. And I want to thank you for putting together such a
thank you.
thought-provoking educational show today.
And thank you for allowing me to do it. This is the first time I've executive produced a TV show.
Well, there's no allowing here. The teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly.
It's all about
but the
teamwork.
Opportunity, I appreciate
Yes, an opportunity.
And
you brought us an opportunity.
Yeah.
So everybody benefits from it. Thank you all for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show, and we look forward to another co-production by Tiffany Norwood. I'm Armstrong Williams, and enjoy the remainder of what's rest of your day.
Happy Global Entrepreneurship Week, everyone.